Good morning. We're in Isaiah chapter 2. We'll read verse 4. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Now the United Nations in the city of New York in America, I believe, they have part of this verse on a wall outside their building. And I guess the idea is that they're proclaiming that their existence is to prevent war and to stop, wars and bring peace in on the earth. But they're hypocrites, of course. They have, and God's actually leading that gathering. But we'll look at that in another video. But they don't quote the whole verse. They quote from here, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares. They don't quote about the Lord, and he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. So just keep that in mind. They got the swords, and they got spears, and they beat them into farming instruments, because there's no need for war anymore. Let's compare that with Joel, the book of Joel. And this is a good lesson in studying your Bible and rightly dividing, just realising that when you're reading prophecy, the prophecies and the writings of the Bible are for different people in different time periods. And nothing could show more clearly than this, because we see a directly contradictory statement to that in the book of Joel. Let's look at the book of Joel here. We'll go from verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Now this is God speaking here. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Look at verse 10. Remember what we read in Isaiah. Beat your plowshares into swords, and let your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Then it says, assemble yourselves. You see that? Isaiah said, beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. And this verse is saying, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. So they didn't put that on their Isaiah wall, did they, at the UN? I was going to show you real quick. This is, I think it's the same way. This is what's called a dispensational chart. And it's just simply a way of laying out the events in the Bible so they're easy to understand. And each of these arches represents a way in which God was dealing with humanity. So this one, I'm going to write while I'm looking through the camera, which might be hard. This one represents an Edenic covenant. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve responded to God in a simple way. They had the whole garden there. They were told not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Otherwise, in the day they eat thereof, they'll surely die. And of course, they ate, and when they ate, something changed. That age, that period of time, that dispensation stopped, and something changed. And after that, we would have what's called an Abrahamic. And the other name we can give for this is innocence. They responded to God out of the innocence of their heart. They hadn't sinned before. All they had to do was keep the law that God had given them. Abrahamic, and this period of time could be called conscience, where men and women are responding to God out of the conscience of their heart. There's no law being given, but they know there's a God, and they've got to respond to God and do what's right in the conscience of their heart. An example of this is when Abraham comes into a land. The ruler there is Abimelech, and Abraham lies, tells Abimelech that his wife is actually his sister. Abimelech takes his wife, and then God comes into him in a dream and says, hey, the woman who you have is another man's wife, not a sister. And Abimelech immediately fears, and he says to God that he hadn't done anything. Now, why did Abimelech fear? Because his conscience bore witness that adultery was wrong. So that men and women respond to God out of the conscience. But something happened here. Something changes again. And this is what we call the Mosaic time, or the time of the law. God gives his law, and now things are written in stone, and they've got to respond and operate toward God out of what the law has said, bringing the sacrifices, following the laws, etc. When Jesus came, another big change, obviously. Jesus says the law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. So when he came, he fulfilled the law. A lot of things happened there. And what he brought in was the age of grace, or the church age. and his apostle for that period was the Apostle Paul, and Paul had all these writings, and that is the age we're in here, and we're looking forward right here to the next event on the calendar, which is the rapture. We're going to go up, and then something's going to change here. And this is where we get to our two prophecies in Isaiah and Joel. In this part here, this is called the tribulation. The tribulation. And that is where the Joel 3 prophecy would come in, I would say. Beat your plowshares, farming instruments, into spears, and your pruning hooks into spears, and your plowshares into swords, because there's going to be war here. The Lord's going to come down at the end of the tribulation, the Battle of Armageddon, and he's saying, hey, get your stuff, turn it into weapons, we're about to fight, make war. But then where does that prophecy from Isaiah fit? All through this, well, not in Eden, but all through here, there's been war. When Jesus came, he didn't defeat the Romans, there was still war, and there's been war all through the church age. And then there's going to be war in the tribulation. So where does Isaiah's prophecy fit, where he says, take your swords that you used to fight with and make them into farming instruments? And that will be in this last age here, which is called the millennium. And that is a time when, after Jesus comes down, defeats the Antichrist, he sets up his kingdom, and something changes here. And Jesus sets up a kingdom of peace in the millennium. There'll be no need for war instruments, and that's where Isaiah's prophecy goes. Here, Isaiah 2. So that's just a quick study on dispensationalism. This is just a chart. It's not like in the back page of your Bible which God gave us. It's just a chart that Bible believers have come up with through history to help people understand the different events that happen through history and which will happen in the future. So when you're reading your Bible and you're reading prophecy, you can get an idea where things belong. You can't take Joel 3 and apply it in the church age and say, all right, I'm going to get me a sword, I'm going to get me a spear, and I'm going to go to war. No, that's for a certain period of time. That's for the tribulation. And the same thing with Isaiah, like the United Nations, claiming to be the peacekeepers on the earth, quoting a verse which God is going to bring in his peace on the earth in the millennium at his time. All right, well, there you go. Bit of a lesson, and God bless you.